Hello and welcome to this section on Identity and Access Management, or IAM for short. Very exciting section. It's our first big section in this course, and also a very important one because it allows you to manage user permissions and understand all these things related to securing access to your account. So super excited. Welcome. Super pumped that you're here for this section. Let's dive straight into it. Okay, so IAM. This tutorial is just going to give us an overview of what we're going to learn, our plan of attack. So first of all, Identity and Access Management. What is it? It's a global service. It's not regional, unlike some other services, and it helps you securely control access to AWS services and resources. It's globally resilient, so your data is secure across all regions. If one region fails, or 2 or 3 regions fails, don't worry, your data is going to be safe. And this is important to know for the exam, that it's globally resilient. And here's what we'll learn in this section. We will learn how to use policies to grant and deny access permissions. They will learn about the 3 types of identities: users, groups, and roles, and we'll dive into each one of them and get hands-on experience with each one of them, except for roles. Roles, we will cover the theory in this section, but we will get the hands-on experience in an upcoming section about EC2, and you'll find out more about why we've structured it this way when you get up to the tutorial on roles. Then we'll cover off the principle of least privilege, how to grant only the permissions that are necessary for the right users, not more than that. We will also cover off how to set up multi-factor authentication for your users, what kind of devices are supported and why it's important. And we will also look at how to create access keys for programmatic access via the CLI, and also we'll actually talk about Cloudshell as well. So here we go. There's a quick summary of this section. Can't wait to dive into it, and I'll see you in the first tutorial. Until then, enjoy the cloud. Hello and welcome back. Today we've got a very exciting tutorial: user permissions and policies in IAM, or Identity Access Management. Let's have a look. So here is our AWS account, and let's say we have a user named Rick who needs read-only access to S3, or the simple storage service. Now what we can do is we can go and look through the available policies that are managed by AWS, and we'll find one which allows S3 read-only access, and all we need to do from there is attach that policy to Rick's profile, and Rick will have that read-only access. Now let's say there's another user named Mary, and both Rick and Mary need access to the EC2 service, full access. So again, we will go into the repository of all policies available in AWS. We will find one called Allow EC2, and we will attach it to both Mary and Rick, and they will both have that desired access. Now I wanted to use this example to illustrate that managed policies you can attach them to multiple users, like we did here in the case with Mary and Rick. Now let's say there's another user called Cleo, and Cleo needs full access to S3, but Cleo shouldn't be able to see a specific bucket called the secret bucket. Now we haven't spoken much about S3 yet, the simple storage service. We'll definitely cover it off further down in the course, and we'll learn what buckets actually are. But for now, just imagine bucket as a folder. So basically, Cleo needs access to all S3, all of the folders except for this one specific folder called the secret bucket. Now, if we go through the AWS managed policies, or the policies provided by AWS, we won't find one specifically for this use case, because the secret bucket is something that we created. It's very unique to our account, and AWS, it's just a very specific use case that AWS doesn't cover because of this name, secret bucket. So we're going to have to create our own policy, and we'll go ahead and create a managed customer managed policy, which will allow S3 and deny that specific bucket that we want to deny. So all of these policies we've discussed so far are called managed policies. The first 2 were managed by AWS, so they're created and maintained by AWS. You can look through them. There's lots of them there, and you can pick out the one that works for you. And if you don't find one there, you can create a custom managed policy, and you can code it like you want, and then attach it to the users that you want. Now, let's look at another kind of policy. And to make this more interesting, let's say that the situation has changed, and now Rick no longer needs any sort of access to S3, they shouldn't have access to S3 at all. So what we can do is we can simply remove the attached policy over here. We can just remove this policy. But to make this more interesting, we're going to actually attach another policy to Rick. And this time we'll attach an inline policy. So an inline policy is different to a managed policy in the sense that this policy can only be attached to one user. It's attached directly into their user profile, and it can't then be attached to any other user. But apart from that, it works exactly the same way. So here we're attaching this inline policy to Rick, and what it's doing is it's denying access to S3. And here we'll see an interesting thing. So we see a situation where Rick has two policies attached. One allows S3 read-only access, and one denies S3 access. So what will win, the allow or the deny? And this is where the policy evaluation logic is important. So here we've got policy evaluation logic. Always you will have an implicit deny by default. So everything is denied unless it's explicitly allowed. Then once there is an explicit allow like we had initially, or in this case, Mary wouldn't normally have access to EC2 by default, but because there's an explicit allow attached to her profile, she has access to EC2. So an explicit allow overrides the implicit or default deny. But then if there is an explicit deny anywhere, even one explicit deny is attached to this profile, so like in this case, there's an allow, but there's also an explicit deny. An explicit deny will always override the explicit allows. So even if there's 5 explicit allows and 1 explicit deny for S3 through different policies, the explicit deny will override all of them. So 1 explicit deny is sufficient to override all explicit allows. Something to keep in mind, this policy evaluation logic is important. So moving on, so we've talked about that. Let's look at a specific policy in action. So here is our policy that we want to create, and this is what it looks like. And we're going to go through this line by line. The first line is the version of the policy language. It's pretty much always going to be the same, 2012, 10, 17. Next is the the statement that will define the permissions. And it has 2 parts. The first part will be allowing S3 access. So this is a unique identifier, it's optional. Then the effect of this part is to allow. Allow what? Well, allow all S3 related actions and allow where on all S3 resources. And then the second part is to deny that bucket. So here we have an optional unique identifier. Then we have an effect, which is deny. Deny what? All S3 related actions. So this asterisk after S3 is a wild card. It means any kind of actions that relate to S3. And deny where? Deny firstly on the bucket itself, so you can't make any changes to the bucket itself. And secondly, on any of the contents inside the bucket, so you can't view anything that's inside the bucket, or you can't put in anything inside the bucket, you can't edit anything inside the bucket, and so on. So there we go. That's what an IAM policy looks like inside. As you can see, it's quite logical and straightforward. On that note, here's a quick summary of everything that we discussed. To remember, for the exam, it's very important to keep in mind the explicit deny, explicit allow, implicit deny, policy evaluation logic. And in general, you want to be giving users the least permissions that they may need. So that's a general rule of thumb in AWS. Follow the principle of least privilege so that they only get the permissions they actually need and not more than that. On that note, I look forward to seeing you back here next time. And until then, enjoy the cloud.
Hello, my friends, and welcome to this new hands-on tutorial on IAM policies. So first, I'm starting here logged out because I want to make sure that we all start from the IAM user. So we're going to select this, then we're going to enter our account alias, click next, and then IAM username and password. All right, so let's click sign in. And here we go. Welcome back to the management console of our admin IAM user. All right, so now the first thing we're going to do is go to IAM by entering IAM here in the search bar and then clicking IAM. And so we've already seen a little bit about users when we were creating the admin user. So let's explore this in more detail now. And so I'm going to go to the diagram you saw in Kyro's lecture. And what we're going to do is create the user Rick with the correct permissions. All right, so let's do this. Let's go back to IAM, then let's go to users and then click add users. Then we're going to give Rick a username, which will be, of course, Rick. Then we're going to click this to provide Rick user access to the AWS Management Console. And then here we say that we want to create an IAM user because that's exactly what we're doing. All right. Then for the console password, well, let's choose a custom password. I just entered one, and then we're going to unselect this to avoid to create a new password at next sign-in. All right, perfect. So then we click next. Then for now, we won't be attaching any policy because I want to show you what happens when we don't have any permissions. So we're directly going to click next. And there you go. Now you can review the details of Rick. And if happy, you can scroll down and click create user. And user created successfully. Perfect. So now we're going to sign in again using this link. So I'm copying the link and I'm going to enter it in a new incognito window. And I'm going to split the screen because we're going to juggle between the admin IAM user account and Rick's account. All right. So here in this new tab, we're going to paste the link. We're going to enter it and we're going to connect to the IAM user account Rick. Okay, so here I'm entering Rick, that's the IAM username. Then we enter the password we just entered, and then we click sign in. And there you go, welcome to Rick's IAM user account. Alright, so now what we're going to do is we're going to enlarge this first, and then we're going to access two essential services of AWS, which are S3 and EC2, and I will show you that actually Rick doesn't have any permission within either of these services. So let's first access EC2, which is a compute service. I'm going to open EC2 here in a new tab. And then same, let's enter S3 here, which is a storage service. And we're going to enter S3 in a new tab. All right, great. And now let's check that we don't have any permission or access in EC2. And there you go. You see all these API errors are there because Rick doesn't have any permission to do anything within EC2. And same for S3. If we go to S3, well, as you can see, you don't have permissions to list buckets. All right, so let's fix this. How are we going to do this? Well, with IAM Policies. So let's go back to our previous tab. Here, we're going to return to the users list. We're going to click continue. We remember the password. And then let's enlarge this to see better. There you go. And let's go to Rick. We stay in the permissions tab and we're going to, of course, add permissions. So let's click add permissions here. Then let's click attach policies directly. Then we're going to attach here first policy, which is the EC2 full access policy. There it is. So we select it. And then we also enter the S3, but this time I want to show you the read-only access policy, which only allows to read within S3, but not, for example, to create a bucket, as we will see very soon. So let's select this one as well. Then let's click next. And there we go. We have our two policies giving us full access to EC2 and read-only access to S3. So let's click add permissions. And now the two policies are well added to Rick. Perfect. So now let's go back to Rick's account. Let's enlarge this. Let's refresh within S3 to see if this disappears. And there you go, it does. You see, now we can see what buckets we have within S3. And now let's check for EC2. Let's refresh this to see if the API errors disappear as well. And they do. But now, remember that we only have the read-only access within S3. So I'm going to show you that if we try to create a bucket by clicking create bucket here and, giving it a globally unique name, like for example, CloudWolf bucket and then a random number like that. Well, you see, if I scroll down and try to create this bucket, well, I don't have the permission to do so because I only have the S3 read-only access policy. All right, and now what we're going to do, well, let's go back to the diagram, which is here. And what we're going to do is embed this deny S3 inline policy within Rick's account. So let me show you how to do this. We go back to IAM. We're going to enlarge this. Then here in the permissions tab of Rick's account, well, we're going to click add permissions and then create inline policy. Great, then we're going to select the JSON tab because in your AWS CCP folder, you will find in the IAM subfolder, well, this policy deny all S3 inline policy. So just open this with a text editor, copy everything, and then back into Rick's account, you're going to paste it. Okay, and so what does this policy do? Well, it denies any action on any resource of S3. All right, so let's scroll down. Let's click review policy. Then we have to give a name to our inline policy and we're going to call it explicit deny policy. Great, then we click create policy and this will create this explicit deny inline policy within Rick's account. And so now, finished line, let's see what happens within Rick's account. So let me actually cancel this and let's see what happens here in the main console of S3. Well, as you can see, once again, we don't have permissions to list buckets. In other words, we don't have permissions to do anything in S3 And that's because originally Rick didn't have any permission, so there was an implicit deny preventing him from accessing S3, but then we added an explicit allow and he could access in read-only mode all of S3, but now that we've added an explicit deny which trumps the explicit allow, once again Rick has no access to S3.
Hello and welcome back. Today we're talking about groups in IAM. So let's imagine that this is our account and we have some users in this account. So we have a team over here and these are developers and they need access to the following AWS services: S3, the simple storage service, EC2, and RDS. And then on the other hand, we have another team inside our organization. These are data scientists and they need access to other tools. They need access to Redshift, SageMaker, and S3. So what can we do? Well, instead of giving each user individual permissions to access the tools that they need, we can group the users into groups. So the developers can go into a group which we will name developers, and then we will assign permissions to that whole group. So the whole group will have permissions to use these three tools, and the users inside this group will inherit these permissions, so they will also be able to use these tools. Then we'll put the data scientists into a group called data scientists and similarly assign permissions for them to use the tools that they need. Now, let's say we also have another user, the CEO, and together Royce, the CEO, and Lynn are managers. They're managers of the organization. Well, they might need access to other tools such as IAM. Again, instead of assigning these permissions individually to each one of them, we can assign this permission to the whole group and they will inherit them. So the important things to know about groups is that a user can belong to no groups at all, can belong to one group, or can belong to many groups, maximum up to 10. You can have up to 5,000 users in your account total, and you can have up to 500 groups. And groups are really just a convenience thing in AWS. They help you organize your permissions in a more efficient way. They're really not much more than that. So that's all we need to know about groups. One last thing to keep in mind for the exam is that groups cannot be nested, so look out for trick questions on that. Groups cannot contain other groups. They can only contain users. Here's a quick summary of what we discussed. I look forward to seeing you back here next time, and until then, enjoy the cloud.
Hello my friends and welcome to this new hands-on tutorial on IAM Groups. So to practice with this, we're gonna create this group of the data scientists here and this group of the managers. Ready? Here we go. So back to the console, we're gonna go of course to IAM. We click the IAM service here and we're gonna go to user groups. Then we click create group. Then we enter a group name which we can call data scientist. And then we're not going to add any users yet because we will be creating the user Lynn. However, of course, back to the console, we're going to attach the permissions policies which will give the IAM users of this data scientist group full access to SageMaker, Redshift, and S3. So let's start with SageMaker. You can just enter SageMaker here and then you will select this one, Amazon SageMaker Full Access. Then you remove the SageMaker filter and you add Redshift. And there you go, you will find the Amazon Redshift Full Access, which you can select as well. And finally, for the third one, S3, you remove the Redshift filter and you enter here S3, after which you will find the Amazon S3 Full Access policy. So let's select this. And now the three policies are selected, so we can just create our first group. And congrats, you created your first IAM group, data scientist. Okay, and now let's create this second group, the group of the managers. So back to the console, let's click again, create group, and enter this time for the group name, managers. And then same, we won't be adding any users for now, but we will attach the IAM full access policy just as managers would need. So let's enter here, IAM, and there you go, you select the IAM full access policy. And we only need this one, so we can scroll down and create our managers group. Congrats again, and now we're going to create the IAM user Lynn, who will not be part of any group at first, but then we will add her to the data scientist group and then to the managers group. So let's do this. We're going to go back to users and then click add users. Alright, so first we have to give a name to our new user. We're going to call her, of course, Lynn. Then again, we're going to provide her user access to the AWS Management Console, and we want to create, of course, another IAM user. Alright, then we scroll down, we're going to choose custom password to choose our own password. There it is. And then we can unselect this so that we don't have to create a new password at next sign in. Alright, so then let's click next. Then as we said, we're not going to add her to any group yet. We will do that later. So we can directly scroll down, click next again. And if you're happy with it, well, you can create your new user, Lynn. And great, the user Lynn was created successfully, so all good. Now we're gonna copy the console sign-in URL and open that in a new incognito window so that we can once again juggle between the two accounts, Hadlin, myself, and Lynn. And so there we go. In the IAM user sign-in page, we're gonna enter here the Lynn username and the password we chose for Lynn. Then we click sign in and welcome to the AWS management console of Lynn's account. Alright, so first let's open SageMaker, Redshift, and S3 and check that Lynn has no access to each of them. So SageMaker, which is a machine learning AWS service, you will find it in machine learning, and then you scroll down and you will find SageMaker at the end. So let's open this in a new tab. Then Redshift, you will find at the very top in Analytics, and you scroll down to find Redshift at the bottom. So same, let's open this in a new tab. And S3, you know where to find it, in Storage, and same, let's open this in a new tab. Alright, and so now let's just check that we have absolutely no access to anything, neither SageMaker or Redshift or S3, which again we have no permissions to access, and so let's fix this thanks to the IAM Groups. So I'm gonna enlarge this a bit to be able to close this, and so now let's go to Lynn, and first add her to the data scientist group. So we're gonna click Groups here, and then add user to Groups, then let's add her to the data scientist group for now, and then click Add to Groups. Alright, perfect. So now Lynn belongs to data scientist. So let's go back to Lynn's account. Let's refresh S3 to see if we have now the permissions to access, for example, the access point. And yes, we do. Perfect. Now let's check Redshift. Let's refresh. And you will see that the access denied will disappear. There you go. Now we have access to Redshift. And same for SageMaker. Let's refresh. And the access denied exceptions will be gone. There you go. We now have access to Amazon SageMaker. Alright, but now let's try to go to IAM and let's see what happens. So let's directly enter IAM here and click the first service, IAM. Then let's enlarge this a bit. And as you can see, we have all these access denied. So once again, let's fix this with the IAM groups. So we're going to go to Lynn again, then go to Groups, then click Add User to Groups. And this time we're going to add her to the Managers group. So we click Add to Groups. And there you go. Now Lynn belongs to the Managers group. And so back to Lynn's account. Let's refresh the IAM management console to see if Lynn now has access. And yes, she does. So there you go. That's how IAM groups work. Now the final thing I want to show you is that again, you can add custom managed policies as well as inline policies to groups if you need to. And to do so, well, you go back to user groups, then take, for example, data scientist group, then click the permissions tab. And there you go. That's where you can add extra permissions by attaching some policies or creating an inline policy.
Hello and welcome back. Today we're talking about IAM roles. Now let's say this is your account, and inside your account you have some resources. You have an S3 bucket, which is effectively a storage facility in S3, somewhere where you're storing your files. And you also have an EC2 instance. Now we haven't spoken about EC2 instances yet, but we'll definitely cover them in a lot of detail in the upcoming tutorials. And this is like a server. Just think of it as a server which might be hosting your website or application. And now you need this EC2 instance to be able to access this S3 bucket. For example, it might need to get some files from there for the operations that it's performing. Now, how do we accomplish this? Well, the correct way of doing this in AWS is to create an IAM role and attach a policy to that role. So you're not attaching the policy to the EC2 instance, you're attaching the policy which allows access to the S3 bucket. You're attaching that policy to the IAM role. And then the EC2 instance will assume this role whenever it needs access. So the way to think about IAM roles, it's a way to temporarily grant permissions necessary for access to AWS services and resources. So this EC2 instance will assume this role, and that's why it looks like a hat. It puts on the hat, it does what it needs, and then it takes off the hat. And that is the most secure and proper way of doing it. And it also has some advantages. Now, other resources can also access this role. Not anybody or absolutely any resource, whoever you specify inside the role. So inside the role, you'll be able to specify who can assume this role, who's allowed to put this hat on. So another EC2 instance might be able to access this role and also access this S3 bucket that way. Users in your account can access this assume this role, and that's a way for them to temporarily get permissions to access this bucket. Users in other AWS accounts can access this, assume this role, and applications can also assume this role. So there we go. IAM roles are in general a very versatile way for granting temporary permissions necessary to access AWS services and resources. So there you go. That's IAM roles. We won't have a practical tutorial on IAM roles in this section, but we'll definitely get some hands-on experience with them in the EC2 section. Here's a quick summary of what we discussed. I look forward to seeing you back here next time. And until then, enjoy the cloud. Hello and welcome back. Today we're talking about multi-factor authentication in AWS, or MFA for short. So an important topic that can come up on the exam. So here we've got our account and we have a user. It might be us, might be somebody else, who wants to access the account. So naturally, they need a password to access the account. However, passwords can get hacked, can get stolen, can get leaked, and therefore they're not the securest way. Just having a password is not the securest way to access your account, and that's why multi-factor authentication comes in handy. So a password is something that you know. It's in your mind, or maybe it's written down somewhere on a paper or in a password management tool. An MFA device an MFA, a multi-factor authentication method, involves something else, not just something that you know, but something that you have. And this can be one of several things. For example, it can be a hardware key that you need to plug into your computer. It can be a hardware token, which when you press a button, it generates a number, and that number you need to enter into your account when you're signing in, and only your hardware token will know which numbers to generate at which points in time. Or it can be a virtual MFA device, an MFA application which you can install on your phone. For example, Microsoft Authenticator is one of those, and there's lots of providers that create these MFA applications, and you can connect them to your AWS account. So those are the three types of MFA devices that AWS supports. So look out for trick questions on any other kind of MFA devices, such as maybe voice recognition or eye scanning. Those are not supported at this moment. And also keep in mind that all the hardware devices, the hardware token, the hardware key, they are not created by AWS. They're created by third parties. So this is also a question that could come up on the exam. Here's a quick summary of what we discussed. I look forward to seeing you back here next time. And until then, enjoy the cloud.
Hello my friends, and welcome to this new hands-on tutorial on setting up MFA, or multi-factor authentication. Indeed, it is AWS best practice to set up MFA. You will see it's part of the AWS recommendations for the root user account. You could also set it up for the IAM user account, but since it is the root user account that has full permissions, well, of course, that extra layer of security is rather necessary on the root user account, which is why right now I'm in the AWS sign-in page where I have to choose to sign in between my root user account or my IAM user account. And as we just said, we're going to select root user. And so we just have to enter our email address, which is the one we chose to create the AWS account. And then we click next. Then we're going to enter the password and we sign in. Okay, so this is going to take me back. Oh, there you go. You see, it's already recommending me that I register multi-factor authentication. But I'm not going to do it here so that I can show you how to do it from the console. So I'm going to skip for now. And in fact, it's very easy to set it up. It's actually going to be, of course, in the IAM service. So there we go. Let's go to IAM, manage access to AWS resources. And you will see it among the recommendations. There you go. Security recommendations, add MFA for root user. Okay, so let's do it here. Let's click Add MFA, and you will see it's super easy. We're going to do it with an authenticator app like Google Authenticator. But first, let's give a name to our MFA device. So I'm going to call it CloudWolf 2025. Okay, then here, yes, indeed, I recommend to choose Authenticator app. This will be the simplest option. Then let's click Next. And here you go. That's where we set up the device. So here, make sure to install Google Authenticator or your preferred Authenticator app on your mobile. You have the list of compatible applications here. Then open the app from your mobile to scan the QR code. So that's exactly what I'm doing right now. I'm opening the Google Authenticator app. In order to scan, we click the plus button at the bottom right. Then we scan the QR code. So I'm just doing it now. There we go. And you will see on your Authenticator app the MFA code. So we actually have to enter 2 codes when we set up MFA, but then you will only have to enter 1 code. So we enter the first code that we see. The one I'm seeing right now is 724376. And we wait just a few seconds to enter the second code entry. All right, so mine is about to expire. And so there we go. I just got my second one, 485 and 260. Okay, then we click Add MFA, and as simple as that, the MFA device is well assigned. Okay, perfect. So now let me show you. I'm actually going to sign out and sign in again, and you will see that now I will have to enter an MFA code besides my password. So here automatically it took me to the IAM user signing page. We have to sign in using root user email. So I'm clicking this, root user indeed. We enter the email address again, cloudwolf2025@gmail.com for me. We click next. We enter the password. We click sign in, and then you will see, there you go. We have to enter the code from our MFA device below. And I still have it open. 042100 is the current MFA code that is happening right now during 30 seconds. So there we go. I click sign in, and this will sign me in with no issue, but with that extra layer of security to my root user account. All right, as you can see, I'm on my root user account with the same account ID. Okay, so there we go. Now you have this extra layer of security. You implemented a new AWS best practice, so congratulations. And now I look forward to seeing you in the next hands-on tutorial. And until then, enjoy the cloud.
Hello and welcome back. Today we've got a quick tutorial about the command line interface, or CLI, and we're also going to cover Cloudshell. So what are these two tools? Well, AWS CLI allows you to interact with and manage AWS resources and services using command line commands. So whether you're using Windows, Mac, or Linux, you can use your command line using AWS CLI to interact with resources in your account. That means you can create EC2 instances, you can terminate them, you can create S3 buckets, you can move files, you can create IAM roles, and lots of other different things. Basically all the same things that we've been doing in the AWS management console in the browser, where we click through the different pages and everything's beautiful, but we have to use our mouse and we have to go navigate different pages in order to get to the settings that we want and to create the resource we want. Well, with CLI, you can do that all with command line commands. Now, an important note for the exam is that in order to enable AWS CLI on your computer, you will need to input your access keys that are generated for your account, and Adlan will show you how to do that in the practical tutorials. But just keep that in mind for the exam, that you do need these access keys for the CLI. Now, Cloudshell is very similar to CLI, but it's browser-based. So whatever browser you're using, you can actually just in your AWS account, you can open up Cloudshell and just get straight into this interface where you can again use command line commands, but you don't need to set anything up on your computer. And you actually, and this is also important for the exam, you don't need to input your access keys. So look out for trick questions about that. Cloudshell doesn't require you to input your access keys, because the way you access Cloudshell is through the AWS Management Console, and so it already knows that it's you, that you're authenticated to be using this account. So now we're going to have some exciting practical tutorials. We're going to start off with Cloudshell because it's easier and it's faster to get going. And then we'll have some tutorials on CLI, but the CLI tutorials are actually optional for this exam, for this certification level. You don't really need to know much about the CLI, so you can skip those tutorials if you like, or you can do them if you'd like to have some fun and know how to set up the AWS CLI. So here's a quick summary of what we discussed. I look forward to seeing you back here next time. And until then, enjoy the cloud.
Hello my friends, and welcome to this hands-on tutorial on AWS Cloudshell. So first thing first, you have two ways of accessing Cloudshell. The first is by either finding it in the services here or entering Cloudshell in the search bar and then click Cloudshell here. And this will take you directly to AWS Cloudshell. And the second way, which is definitely way faster, is by clicking this shortcut button here, which will take you again directly to AWS Cloudshell. Alright, so AWS Cloudshell is a browser-based shell that gives you command line access to your AWS resources in the selected AWS region. And that's very important. Know that Cloudshell is actually not available in every region. So make sure that you are still in North Virginia, US East 1, because it is one of the regions where you can use Cloudshell. And to know the other regions, you can click Learn More here. And then you will find the regions in Supported Regions right here. And then AWS Cloudshell page, which will list all the regions where you can use Cloudshell. So as you can see, you have US East 1, US East 2, West 2. You have all the regions here, okay? So let's go back to Cloudshell and play a little bit with it. So I'm going to close this. And so the first thing that I want to show you is that with Cloudshell, we don't need to enter our credentials. And to show you this, I'm going to enter the following command, which is AWS S3 ls, which is a command that will list the different folders, also called buckets, in the S3 AWS service, which you will see right after this section on IAM. And indeed, if I press enter here, well, we don't get any message that we need to enter our credentials to access S3. And that's because the credentials are applied by AWS in the background. Now let's play a bit more with it. Let's create a very simple text file because I want to show you that in AWS Cloudshell you can actually store for free 1 GB of data, including, for example, a text file in a Cloudshell session storage. And so to illustrate this, I'm going to enter the following command, echo, then in quotes, hello, my friends, enjoy the cloud. And then I just continue with this, and I will put this text in a text file that I will call very simply readme.txt. And so then if I press enter, it will create this text file. And now this text file is in the session storage, meaning the storage of our current session here. Indeed, if I enter ls here to list the items in the storage of our current session, well, you will see that after pressing enter, it will find this text file we just created, readme.txt. Okay? Now know that whatever you have in the storage of your Cloudshell session, you can download it by simply clicking actions here and then download file. And then here you simply enter the name of your file, readme.txt. And then you click download and this will download the file on your machine. There you go. And also know that you can upload any item you want in your session storage by clicking upload file here. And then you can just select the file on your machine. Alright, so I actually prepared a file in my desktop, data.csv. I'm going to open it and upload it in my session storage. And now it is uploading the file, data.csv, and I will have it in my Cloudshell session storage. Alright, file upload successful. And so now indeed, if I enter ls again, we will not only see the readme text file, but also the data.csv file that I just uploaded. Great! Whatever you have right now in your session storage will stay in Cloudshell as long as you stay in the same region. And that's because you have one session and therefore one session storage per region where Cloudshell is available. Alright? So that was a quick introduction to Cloudshell, and now in the next hands-on tutorial I will introduce you to CLI, but know that this will be an optional tutorial because it's out of the scope of the exam. So I'll see you anyway in the next hands-on tutorial, and until then, enjoy the cloud. Hello my friends and welcome to this new hands-on tutorial on AWS CLI. So first, this tutorial is optional because AWS CLI is out of the scope of the exam, but it would still be quite useful for you to know how to access AWS the programmatic way. Alright, so if you're interested, let's do this. So first, we're going to open a new tab and we're going to enter AWS CLI. And then there you go, that's the first link, but we can take this shortcut which will directly take us to where we can install the AWS CLI. And if you scroll down here, you will see all the AWS CLI install instructions for the 3 operating systems, Linux, macOS, and Windows. Alright, so you have very clear instructions, you can just follow them step by step, and you will have no issue installing CLI on your machine. And these are the instructions for Windows. As you can see, it's quite fast and easy. And right now I'm on a Mac, so I'm going to do it on macOS here. Alright, so on Mac it's pretty simple. I just have to download this pkg file, which will install CLI version 2. I'm going to click save. And now I'm going to go to my desktop folder, open the installer, and then just click continue, 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 agree, continue, and install. And this will install AWS command line interface, after which pretty soon I will be able to use it. There we go. And now what we have to do, whether we are on a Mac, a Windows, or Linux, is to open a terminal. So for Windows users, you can use the command prompt or PowerShell, which you can find by clicking the Windows button at the lower left and then scrolling down to the bottom where you will find PowerShell, so you can just open it. Then Linux users, you just have to press Ctrl plus Alt plus T and this will instantly open a terminal. And for Mac users, you can enter Command plus Space and enter terminal. All right, there we go. And now in the terminal, well, let's start by entering the same command as we entered in Cloudshell and see what happens. So remember, it was AWS S3 ls, which is basically a command that accesses S3. Let's press enter, and what do we get? We get this: unable to locate credentials. You can configure credentials by running AWS configure. So there you go. As opposed to Cloudshell where the credentials are in the backend, here in CLI, you have to enter your credentials. And so where are they? Where can we find them in AWS? I'm sure that rings a bell. Well, you can find them, of course, in IAM. Remember when we created that user? We had those two options for accessing AWS. The first one was the management console access, and the second one was the programmatic access. And so let's go back to our users here to this time have this programmatic access option selected. So I'm going to my very first IAM user, Hadlin, myself. And then to enable programmatic access, you just have to go to security credentials here. You scroll down, and there you go, you will find access keys, because access keys are exactly the credentials that we need to enter in CLI. All right, so here we go. Right now we don't have access keys, so we're going to create some. And the access keys are composed of two elements: an access key ID, which is this ID here, and a secret access key. And now two things you should be careful with. First, this extremely important warning that says to never post your secret access key on public platforms. So that's for sure, you and only you should know your secret access key. And also, know this is the only time right now that you will be able to view the secret access keys. So I'm going to show it to you right now, even though I will immediately delete those access keys after this tutorial, because me and only me is supposed to know it. And on your side, I recommend that you download the .csv file and keep it somewhere super safe if you want to use access keys in the future. All right, so let's do this. Now let's enter those credentials. I'm going to first copy the access key ID here. Then let's go back to the terminal. And now to enter those credentials, you can enter the following command, AWS configure. So here we go. Let's press enter, and it will first ask us, there you go, for the AWS access key ID, which I just copied. So I'm going to paste it and then press enter. And then there you go, it will ask us for the secret access key, which is this one. So I'm going to copy that as well, go back to my terminal and paste it here. Then we press enter. Now it asks you for the default region name, and we can enter the one that we will mostly use in this course, which is US East 1. Let's press enter. And then finally, no need to enter any output format here, so we're going to directly press enter. And there we go. Now our credentials are entered correctly in CLI. And so now let's try again to access S3 with the AWS S3 ls command. Are you ready? Let's press enter. And there you go. Now, just like in Cloudshell, we can access S3. Alright, so that's it for this optional tutorial. I look forward to seeing you in the next hands-on tutorial, and until then, enjoy the cloud.